The atomic bomb was the only way to end the war because the war would have continued longer.
The other alternative would have been a ground war. The reason this wouldn't have helped this situation is because there would have been more deaths. Do you have any idea how many American lives would have been lost had we launched a ground invasion of Japan instead of dropping the bomb? This young Japanese told us that all his fellow soldiers believed that Japan was winning the war. To them, the losses of Iwo Jima and Okinawa were parts of a grand strategy to lure the American forces closer and closer to the homeland until they could be pounced upon and utterly annihilated. There was every reason to think that the Japanese would defend their homeland with even greater fanaticism than when they fought to the death on Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Some of the more informed and intelligent elements in the Japanese official circles realized that they were fighting a losing battle and that the complete destruction lay ahead if the war continued. These elements, however, were not powerful enough to sway the situation against a dominating army organization backed by the profiteering industrialists, the peasants, and the ignorant masses. The bulk of the Japanese people did not consider themselves beaten. In fact, they believed they were winning in spite of the terrible punishment they had taken. They watched the paper balloons take off and float eastward in the wind, confident that these were carrying a terrible retribution to the United States in revenge for our air raids.
Fat Man was the second bomb the U.S. dropped on the Japanese because they refused to surrender after the first bomb was dropped, which was named LilBoe. The Japanese motto was to fight to the death, which was why there weren't many Japanese prisoners. The atomic bomb introduced a dramatic new element into the situation, which strengthened the hands of those who sought peace and provided a face-saving argument for those who had hit hurdle advocated continued war. When the second atomic bomb was dropped, it became clear that this was not an isolated weapon, but that there were others to follow. With dread prospect of a deluge of these terrible bombs and no possibility of preventing them, the argument for surrender was made convincing. This I believe to be the true picture of the effect of the atomic bomb in bringing the war to a sudden end, with Japan's unconditional surrender. And it was not one atomic bomb, or two, which brought surrender. It was the experience of what an atomic bomb will actually do to a community, plus the dread of many more, that was effective. But a secondary outcome of this devastating bombing is it created a permanent stigma and fear of these powerful weapons that changed how we view warfare forever. On August 6, 1945, an event occurred that changed the world in every way imaginable, and whose effects we are still living with today. Everyone viewed this bombing as so excruciating that there was no possible retaliation.
In August 1945, the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan, killing as many as 135,000 people, mostly civilians. The devastation and fallout also led to severe health problems for survivors and their children and decimated civilian communities. So why exactly did the United States drop nuclear weapons on Japan? Well, in the years leading up to the bombing, World War II was in full swing. On one side were the Allies, consisting of the US, the UK, and a number of mostly European countries. On the other were the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan. The catalyst for direct confrontation between the US and Japan happened on December 7, 1941. At the time, Japan had begun advancing their fleet into the Central and Southwest Pacific, which included US territory in the Philippines. Japan intended to neutralize the threat of US force by bombing their Pacific fleet at Pearl Harbor. The surprise attack didn't disable the U.S. Navy, but it did immediately result in a formal declaration of war on Japan. Fast forward to 1945, Italy had already surrendered, and the Allies were invading the German capital. On April 30th, Adolf Hitler committed suicide, and by May, Germany surrendered. But Japan refused to surrender and continued to fight unabated. Now, with all eyes on Japan, the Allies needed to figure out how to end the war and prevent further casualties. The first plan was to conduct an all-out invasion of the Japanese mainland in what was called Operation Downfall. However, Japan's unique geography meant there was really only one predictable invasion entry point. A preliminary study determined that as many as 280,000 people would die in the invasion. In July, the Allies called for Japan to surrender, promising to bring prompt and utter destruction if they refused. Japan ignored the request. Seemingly left with no better options, The decision was made by the US and the UK to drop a secret atomic bomb on one of Japan's industrial and military strongholds, Hiroshima. It was also noted by US officials that the bomb would be a significant display of power in post-war relations with the Soviet Union. On August 6, 1945, a bomber plane dropped a 15-kiloton bomb, killing 30% of Hiroshima's population almost instantly. In the following days, the Allies again called for Japan's surrender, warning of further destruction if they refused. Japan did not respond, but by early morning Moscow time on August 9th, the Soviet Union surprised Japan by declaring war and invading a Japanese-held city. This shook Japanese officials who did not expect the Soviets to violate their neutrality agreement. It also removed a huge assurance for Japan that the Allies would not be able to easily invade them by land. Several hours later, the U.S. dropped another atomic bomb, this time at Nagasaki, killing as many as 75,000 people. After 6 days of deliberations, Japan officially announced their unconditional surrender on August 15th, finally ending World War II. Today, the lasting effects of the bombings can still be seen throughout the two cities. Despite repairing the physical damage and rebuilding the relationship between the U.S. and Japan, the events continue to weigh heavily in both countries' histories. Over the past 70 years, the moral excuse for dropping nuclear weapons has been widely challenged and debated. To find out how the U.S. and Japan managed to overcome their past,
the atom bomb, the most devastating weapon mankind has ever invented. A nuclear weapon around the strength of the bomb that went off in Hiroshima is going to release an absolutely cataclysmic amount of energy. The amount of energy that we're talking about is akin to being dropped into the center of the sun. In Hiroshima and then Nagasaki, almost 100,000 people died immediately. The people who were on the fringes of this blast were actually the ones who suffered the most. If you were in Hiroshima and you were close enough to see the blast, but far enough away that it didn't kill you, the last thing that you ever saw was that bright flash. And it would have blinded you. The back of your eyes, the retina, melt away. And you received a radiation dose equivalent to thousands and thousands of chest x-rays. The human body can absorb just so much radiation before it falls apart, because the very cells that you need to heal are dying from the radiation poison. If the radiation dose is intense enough, it'll actually look like a thermal or burn injury. Blisters will form. Layers of skin will begin to slough off. Your body's vital functions will begin to slow down, stop. If you were fortunate enough to get a lower dose of radiation, then you might not have died immediately, but it doesn't mean that you aren't susceptible to getting almost any type of cancer known to man, 20, even 30 years later, because you'll develop perhaps multiple cancers at the same time.